Amen. Thank you. So this morning we're continuing in this series. We're in session 3 of this series. But the question I want to start with this morning is, what are some of the major issues? It don't have to be major. What are some of the issues that we deal with in this world that are going on that should be solvable? Don't have to be around here. In the world in general. Hunger. Yeah, certainly. Rise Against Hunger. We're doing an activity to help with that, right? What are some other things that we see going on?
Illness.
A lot of different illnesses.
With the research and capabilities we have in industrialized nations,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of deaths from illnesses that shouldn't occur.
Yes. Yeah, and I've even wondered sometimes, talking about that, it seems like certain things like cancer are so much more abundant than it used to be. Is it really, or is it just our ability to diagnose is much better than it used to be, and our ability to diagnose is much outgrown our ability to cure? I don't know. I'm just, you wonder sometimes on things. Certainly those are two of the major things that hit our mind most times. You think the wars that's going on, the police, look at what they're facing, the things that they every day. Who would have ever thought in America we would see police assassinated on duty? And we're having police officers get killed on duty that obviously are set up for this. They're coming up behind them and or in their car and shooting them while they're sitting, things like that. So, if we see these issues, and you see all the knowledge that we have, and we talk about and I wish I'd looked this up. I looked it up a long time ago, and I can't remember the numbers. The speed in which the amount of data that's available to us doubles has gone down to it's just a few days. It may be like 10 to 12 days that information doubles in the world, and we have access to it at our fingertips. We're sending more people to college than we've ever sent. So why aren't we able to fix these things? If we've got all this knowledge, you think some of these things, especially when you get into the medical stuff, or like you was talking, for on the hunger side, why can't we fix with knowledge the things that need to be fixed?
I think a lot of it's selfishness.
Yes. So there's a flaw in knowledge, isn't there? You can know everything, you can have all this knowledge at your fingertips and all these things you can do with it, but we still have one equation that gets in the way. It's us. We're flawed. We do things, we are born into a sinful world, and we picked up this sinful nature almost immediately, and knowledge can't fix that. And that's very frustrating, isn't it? I mean, we see this stuff and you think, especially with some of these illnesses that we see, we think, we've got all this knowledge, we understand how the human body works better than we ever have before in history. We're able to do things that we've never been able to do before because of the things that's been built and the things that are available to us, yet we still can't fix things completely. We've improved a lot of things. Now, don't get me wrong. I think knowledge has helped us move forward tremendously. But we still haven't come up with a way to fix the things, because if you think of all the knowledge that's available, this world should be a much better place, shouldn't it? But it seems like for all the things we do and all the knowledge and all the things we build to make our lives better, those things can be twisted, can't they? As you mentioned, there's a lot of corruptness in the world that we have to deal with. One of the things we really looked at when we was looking at for the Rise Against Hunger was the reputation of the ministry. When you give money, is the money really going to help feed people, or is it going to someone's pocket? And it's interesting when you start looking through and getting information back on different organizations that not just for hunger, but for just about anything that takes money donations or time donations, whatever it may be. And it's interesting to see the ratings on those. Because some of them, and I'm not saying people don't deserve a paycheck that's working in these, right? Somebody's doing a job, they need to be have remuneration for that job. But when you get salaries that's upwards over $1 million for a volunteer organization, you're thinking, it seems a little out of kilter on this. So we see these things happening, and it does. It affects the ability of our knowledge. Because if you're doing things and saying, hey, we want you to have this, but you've got something that's corrupt in between that, it doesn't always get to what you want it to go to. So today we're going to be looking, and it talks about the problem with wisdom. Now, I don't really like the title of that one that much, because I don't know that there's a problem with wisdom other than one, and we're going to get into that because Solomon does talk about his problem with wisdom. But it is we have to strive, we have to work to gain wisdom. Now, if you look at wisdom and knowledge, what's the difference between the two?
Application.
Yes. Yeah, wisdom is mostly the application of knowledge, right? You can have knowledge all day long, and I know people like this. I work with some very smart PhDs in the chemical area that when they start talking, or some of these molecular models that we have and stuff like that, I love talking to these guys because in about 2 seconds I'm going, I don't even know what you're saying anymore. They're speaking a whole different language. Especially, and it was so funny, I may have shared this with you before, if I did, just act like I hadn't, because it hurt my feelings if I feel like I repeat myself. I got to meet some of these quantum physicists, and I've had the privilege of meeting some of the top 5 quantum physicists in the world. They come in and met with our team to go over some stuff we're wanting to do. And it was so comical, because this guy turned around, he gets up on board and he starts drawing stuff how this is going to work, like I'm understanding, what he's saying. And it's going to make it better if he draws it on board for me to understand it. And as he drew on board, I was there looking at it, it's just a bunch of squiggly lines and cubes. And so he turned around and I said, I don't have a clue what you just drew. Don't have a clue what you're saying, but it sounds really cool. So as long as you believe it, I'm good with it. It's amazing. But that knowledge, that much knowledge, without the ability to apply it, it's really useless, isn't it? It really does nobody any good. And that's the difficult part of knowledge. It's fairly easy to gain knowledge. We can read books. Can you go to school, though, and get a BS degree in knowledge or in wisdom?
No.
There's nothing. You can go to any school, anywhere. You can't even write a big enough check. I didn't throw it in there. To get into a school to do that. Sorry. I'm current. I know what's going on. I do see the news occasionally.
Your name's Lori?
But, it just isn't something you can go read a book and find out. You can't sit in a room by yourself and read books and build wisdom. And that's difficult for us, because that's what we want to do. We're so used to, in our lives, the way most of us function is, if I want something, I can go buy it, or I can earn it, I can do something to get it without having to go through a lot of extra steps, typically. Now, there's things that we have to go through, and you just have to go through the hard way and get it. But that human nature comes back in. And we all struggle with it, and we all deal with it our whole lives. It's so funny. I remember we used to talk about, if you ever question, people say, well, God intended us, and God did intend our lives to be perfect, right? And then we allowed sin in to our lives. Adam and Eve opened the door, and from that point on, we've dealt with sin in our lives as we first come into this world. So if you get 2 kids, put them in a room and set a toy down between them that both of them like, what's going to happen?
The toys will get broke.
Yeah, because they're going to be fighting over it. And it's just, nobody had to say, now I want you all to go fight over this. But their nature is not to say, well, here, you play with it first and I'll play with it when you're done. It's just not the way our human nature works. We are born into sin. We have a sinful nature built into us. So we have this fight going on constantly. We've talked about this before, this struggle with ourselves, with our old selves and our new nature that God has put in place. And that's where true wisdom comes from. It's from God. God gives us the knowledge, and not even arguably, Solomon is known as being the wisest person ever to walk the face of the planet. And we're going to see and hear him talking about the struggle he had with gaining wisdom. To me, that speaks volumes to me. How are we going to do this? And is it futile? Are we kidding ourselves to think we're going to gain wisdom? Because if Solomon couldn't attain the level of wisdom he wanted, who are we to think we can? God gave him the gift of wisdom. He asked for that, and God granted that for him. Yet he still felt like he was not a wise person in many instances. And if you look back and read, he was not. But most times it was because he separated himself from God. And that's where he always run into struggles. Just the same as we are today. We run into these same struggles. So we're actually in a couple of different chapters in Ecclesiastes today. And I'll start off, we'll read chapter 2, all of chapter 2, verses 12 through 17. And then we'll read the chapter 7 in just a few moments. He says in chapter 12, "Then I turned to consider wisdom, madness, and folly. For what will the king's successor be like? He will do what has already been done. And I realized that there is an advantage to wisdom over folly, like the advantage of light over darkness. The wise person has eyes in his head, but the fool walks in darkness. Yet I also knew that one fate comes to them both. So I said to myself, what happens to the fool will also happen to me. Why then have I been overly wise? And I said to myself that this is also futile. For just like the fool, there is no lasting remembrance of the wise, since in the days to come both will be forgotten." Excuse me. "How is it that the wise person dies just like the fool? Therefore I hated life, because the work that was done under the sun was distressing to me. For everything is futile, and the pursuit of the wind." If you read that and we stop there, that's kind of depressing, isn't it? He's saying, just quit. Don't even try. Go to the house. It's over. There's nothing good going to come of this that's going to be long lasting. And he's right. In and of itself, apart from God, what he's saying is exactly right. Now we're going to get into the next part in just a little bit where he goes on to talk about that. But it's one of those things. I think it's interesting. You know, he compares the being wise and being and having folly as being like light and dark. Now, we're all familiar with going into a dark room, right? I mean, if you've been in some really, really dark rooms where you can't even do this and see your hand, what happens when you strike a match?
Feel more at ease.
You do, don't you? Isn't it funny how darkness, even if you're in an empty room that you know nobody else is in there, isn't it weird how you get that instant tightness of, this is uncomfortable. It's an unknown around us, isn't it? Because we can't see. There's only been a few rooms. It's hard to get in a total dark room. If you sit there while you guys adjust and start kind of picking up things. Years and years ago, I know y'all getting ready to go to San Francisco, which if you go to Alcatraz, I think they will still put you in solitaire. May not let you out if I know what day you're going anyway. But years and years ago, they would put you in solitaire and actually shut the door so you could experience what that was like. And I'll never forget that feeling when they shut that door. It was complete and total black. There was no light anywhere at any seam of anything that you could see. And they left us in there long enough for our eyes to adjust. Now, we're in a room full of people, so it wasn't, you didn't have that fear, other than the fact that, if you had claustrophobia, it would have been a really bad place to be in. But literally, I was doing this in front of my, trying to see something. Could not see anything. But it is amazing to me that one little light, as small as that, now, if you strike a match in a bright room like this, wouldn't really get your attention, would it? It's not that bright, but in a very dark room, that light brings light, and the light dispels the darkness. And I think that's what he's getting at here. If you look at this, wisdom will dispel the folly. The things that we have in our life that are foolish, that are going on, they dispel, they go away as we gain wisdom. Because they can't exist together. You can't have this wisdom and the folly going on at the same time. Now, I'm not saying folly as to have a good time. I'm saying folly is foolishness. As we gain in wisdom, we're going to reduce in our foolishness and the things that distract us. And 99% of the time, that's the things of the world, right? As we focus on God and concentrate on His wisdom, we start seeing a change in our life. And that's so important for us. If you look around our church, we have a lot of folks that are elderly that have been in church their whole lives. I love to sit down with them sometimes and just talk, because the wisdom they bring, and a lot of them, from that era, they may not even have a high school education. But the wisdom they have gained over the years, and their walk with God and their relationship they have built, that wisdom comes across so well. And you just want to soak it in and say, wow, I wish I could just take that and apply it in my life. So I don't have to go through and fight the same battles that they did to gain that wisdom. But we still have to. We still have to go through and do that. Now, I think it's interesting as he gets into this, and you see a little bit of his frustration here. He says, as he looks at this, he also understands that, he says in the latter part of verse 14, yet I also knew that one fate comes to them both. I said to myself, what happens to the fool will also happen to me. Why then have I been overly wise? So he comes to a realization here. No matter how wise he is, he and the fool are both going to die at the end of this. And we can agree on that, right? Every one of us has death coming to us at some point in our life. We don't know when that is, and that's probably a very good thing that we don't know when that is. But at some point, this body is going to quit. If this is all we have, and that's where he's going with this, if this is all we have, is struggling to be wise worth it? Why go through all this if at the end, me and the fool both die, and that's it? There's nothing else. And that's a good question. And I think we need to think about those things. Do you really believe, because it calls into question our beliefs, right? Do we really believe that there is a heaven? Do we believe that God went on to prepare this place? When Jesus went on, he says, I've gone to prepare a place for you, and if I go to prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you unto myself, that where I am, there you may be also. We have to believe that. Because if not, we're in the same situation that Solomon found himself as he's searching through this to understand the benefits of wisdom. If you don't have God in that, you're not truly wise. And with all of Solomon's wisdom and the things he struggled with through his life, with that wisdom was still his walk with God. He still struggled and still separated himself from God and wanted to do his own thing. And he experimented. And that's what a lot of this is. If you read through Ecclesiastes, he'll say, I'm going to test this. I'm going to try this. And Solomon's searching. He's trying to understand life as a whole. Which is great for us because we can learn from his wisdom and see the things that he struggled with. But I think in many instances, exactly like this, if we drop on down in verse 17, it says, I hated life, for the work that was done under the sun was distressing to me. For everything is futile and a pursuit of the wind. If I do all these things without God, what's the use? If I work really hard to achieve something, and I amass all these things, we talked about last week, all the things that he had, the houses, he had the vineyards, he had the orchards that he had done, the irrigation systems, the servants, all these things he had amassed. But without God, what does that mean? At some point, If we amass a fortune around us, is that going to keep us from dying?
Nope.
What's going to happen to it?
When you're in the ground.
Yes. Yeah. Somebody else will be fighting over it. Sorry.
I said it'd be left for someone to fight over.
Yeah. Yeah. It could cause problems even the more you have, and at best, at some point it's going to go away. I always like what is that? Crocodile Dundee, I think, first or second one, I can't remember which one it is. And he actually makes a comment in there that, you know, he gets a question about who owns the land or something like that down there. And he said, it's kind of a silly question. He said, it's like two fleas trying to fight over who owns the dog that they're riding on. And I thought, yeah, it's a pretty good thing. You know, if you think about what we're fighting over many times and what we're trying to gain, God owns it all, and we're trying to argue over who's got it. Because it's temporary. Everything here is temporary. We have a home going to that we're going to be going to one day. If we've given our lives to God, that is going to make our best day here is going to be as nothing compared to our work any day in heaven. It's going to be awesome. And it's hard for us to get that in our head, and it's hard for us to keep that in our head because the devil does such a good job of distracting us to get us so caught up in what's going on right now that we don't look ahead. We forget what God has prepared for us and what He's wanting for us and the life He wants us to have because we get distracted and we let things ease into our life that causes us to lose our wisdom, to not think in a wise way and choose wisely as we're going through. Now, I do want to switch over, and I want to read the second part of this. As there's a couple things we'll go back up and point out, but I want to read in chapter 7, verses 23 through 29. Verse 23 says, I have tested all this by wisdom. I resolved I will be wise, but it was beyond me. What exists is beyond reach and very deep. Who can discover it? I turned my thoughts to know, explore, and examine wisdom and an explanation for things, and to know what wickedness is, that wickedness is stupidity and folly is madness. I love that, calls it wickedness, stupidity. Solomon just kind of calls it the way he sees it, right? I like he's very blunt. Verse 26 says, and I find it more bitter than death, the woman who is a trap, her heart and a net and her hands chains. The one who pleases God will escape her, but the sinner will be captured by her. Look, says the teacher, I have discovered this by adding one thing to another to find out the explanation, which my soul constantly searches for, but does not find. I found one person in 1,000, but none of those was a woman. Only see this, I have discovered that God made people upright, but they pursue many schemes. Now, if we look at the first part of this, he's talking about, again, he's pursuing wisdom, right? And you kind of hear his frustration even again in this. I'll be wise, but it was beyond me. Now, why would it be that the wisest man on earth could not find wisdom? What would be the struggle with finding wisdom for him? He had everything available to him. And as I thought about this in my head, I went over it, and I'm thinking, if I was in his shoes, he considers himself wise. He knows he's wise because God has granted him that gift of wisdom. Yet he says here, I keep pursuing, it's beyond me. He's frustrated. And again, I think it goes back, if you look at this, the reason he's frustrated is because an absence of God in his life at that time. He's struggling because he's looking for something that is eluding him because he refuses to turn to God to get it. Don't we do the same thing today? How many times have we reached for something that is our choice? Not to say it's a bad thing, but it's not necessarily the direction God wanted us to go in. And all of a sudden we find ourselves frustrated. Yeah, if you're like me, I do this a lot because I'm pretty hard-headed, and I'll tell God, here's my plan, instead of asking Him what is my plan, I'll tell him, here's my plan, God, and here's how I'm going to do this, and I'd like for you to come along with me. And I think we can make this happen. You know, and I'm going to this like I've got this. You know, you just need to get on board. If you just see it my way, you know I'm right. And I try to convince God at times. You know, that's part of my job at work is to convince people to move in a certain direction. So, you know, I try to do that with God. You know, he mentions here stupidity. I'm the definition sometimes of stupidity when it comes to doing things like that with God. God doesn't want us to do that. Will God allow us to do that though?
Yes.
Yeah. Worst thing God can do most times is let us have our way. Because we will mess it up over a period of time. Just give it enough time. Excuse me. And what we end up with down the road is ourselves sitting there feeling all tense about something, we're frustrated about something, whatever that may be, and wondering why this isn't working the way it was supposed to work. I had such a good plan. What is the problem? Where are you, God? And God will speak to us if we be quiet and say, that's not where I wanted you to go. I want you over here. That's the part where wisdom comes in, and we have to be wise enough to know when to listen, when to be quiet, and listen to God's guidance in our lives. And without that, no matter how wise we consider ourselves to be, such as Solomon, and I certainly wouldn't put any of us in the class that Solomon was in when it comes to wisdom, he still struggled with the same thing that we struggle with today. And I guarantee you, if you go out and talk to anybody that's been in church, maybe they've been in their 90s and they're in church their whole life, and they've done all these things for God, and they're such a great example for us. None of them would consider themselves wise. They would not consider that they have made that point to where they have become wise, because wisdom is with God. And the quicker we understand that, the only wisdom we can have in our lives is coming from Him. That He helps us make those decisions. And He helps us do those things. And we even see this as he goes on down in verse 26 through 29. He talks about this more bitter than the death of a woman. So he's really against women here, so y'all can close your ears. No, I'm just kidding. He's really not. He just uses this as a good example.
Not very well.
As an example, okay. He's talking about infidelity here when he goes through this. You know, somebody falling into a trap. You know, into a woman's trap that's pulled them into it. This is sin, folks. This is what sin does in our lives. Can we find wisdom when we're living in sin?
Worldly.
Yes. And what's that going to lead to?
No. Misery.
Right. Misery and frustration in it. But the world will not tell us that. And many times we're in so deep by the time we do realize that. And sin is that way, right? Isn't it amazing? And I know we hit on this just a little bit last week. Isn't it amazing how tempting sin is? You know, it's one of the things that we ease into it so carefully many times. We don't even realize we're doing it. And all of a sudden we're in so deep that we sometimes don't know our way out. But we'll try to figure it out. And it's because, you know, maybe we're ashamed to pray about it. Maybe we don't want God to know. That's a joke, isn't it? We don't want God to know what's going on in our life. But we allow this to get a hold of us. Just like he said, it says her heart is a net and her hands are like chains. They wrap around us. Sin wraps around us and it holds us so tight that we just feel like there's no escape. And without that wisdom in our lives, and at that point, wisdom may be just the knowledge to say, I need to turn to God. That's all wisdom. That's all the wisdom we may have at that point in our life. To know enough to say, you know what, God, I can't handle this. I got myself here and I don't know how to get out. I need you to help me. I need you to do it for me. And God's always willing to say, okay. He picks us up And he pulls the chains off of us. And he sets us on our feet again. And we get a fresh start. That is the coolest thing in the world. Jesus, through his blood, has wiped away our sins. So no matter how dirty we get, no matter what is going on in our life that is distracted us, that's pulled us away, that's done all these things, that's taken our wisdom from us, Jesus' blood turns that pure again. That is awesome. And if that don't give us the energy to search for wisdom and keep working for that wisdom, I don't know what does. I don't think there's anything that can.
That's our only hope.
Yes.
I mean, that's the only thing that's our hope.
That's it, isn't it?
That's it.
David, I think too, that we have to be careful when you think about wisdom, and you related it to chains, sin being like chains. I think those are the easy ones sometimes, because when you're in sin that feels like a chain, if you're chained, you want to get out of it. Yes. But I think about the analogy like in the God's Not Dead movie, whichever one it was, but talk about being in a room or a cell somewhere where the door's open, but you don't want to leave, because the devil tricks you into thinking, why would I want to leave this?
Yeah.
Why would I give this up? I know I can get out, but why leave? This is great.
That's true.
And we're in the middle of that sin, but the sin that's like a chain, we want to get out of because we don't want to be chained. But I think we have to be careful and have the wisdom to recognize the sin that we don't realize we need to get out of, but we should.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right, Dickie. There are certainly different types of sin in there, and there are some that we enjoy. We may not want it, and it could be tied with anything in our lives that sometimes we want to dabble in sin, don't we? You know, we'll stay in church and we dabble in sin at the same time, and we all do that to a certain degree. Right? I mean, sin is in our lives, but it's those choices. That's the difference. We choose to do this. Yeah, and that's the difficult part. Then is and again, the wisdom comes into play that we're getting from God to understand that we're going down this path, to understand what this does to our lives, and the struggle that happens. Are we going to have peace when that's in our life? I don't think we'd ever have peace. When sin is in our life, in any aspect of sin is in our life, we're not going to have the kind of peace He wants us to have. And you know, I'm sure everyone has experienced those moments, and you know, it's those short little snippets in our life that I can look back and think, man, I don't even know what was going on. I may have just been driving down the road, and all of a sudden there was just this total peace that come over me before. That all of a sudden nothing mattered in this world. I knew it was all going to be okay. And it wasn't that anything changed except me. And I said, God, this is yours. I can't control it. I don't know how to do it. I give it to you totally. And for a moment, just total peace. And then I ruin it, you know, by start thinking again. And yeah, no, I need to fix these things. You know, it was great for a minute, but now let me ruin my life again. So we do that to ourselves many times. We do cause this on ourselves. But I think that if we look at what he's trying to get through, and I love the way he finished what we're finishing with in this lesson today. In verse 29, he says, "Only see this: I have discovered that God has made people upright, but they pursue many schemes." God made us right. He created each one of us the way He wanted to create us. Nobody here is an accident. Nobody here, God was not surprised when any of us was born. He just, oh wow, I didn't see that one coming. You know, He may put Jason back.
Probably right.
Or Jason back. There's too many double names in here. Scott and Scott. Dave. We're going to have to work on these doubles. But He didn't make any mistakes, did He? He made us upright. He wanted us to be the way we are, to worship, to follow Him. He wanted to have that relationship with us. Could He have made us to where we had no choice but to worship him. Yeah. We'd have been just like the angels, right? They have no choice. That's what they're created for, is to worship God. He loved us so much that he said, I'm going to let you choose to worship me. And if you do that, I know that love is real. Because we're turning away from our nature to look to him. If somebody makes that choice, when your children make a choice to do something to please you, it's different, isn't it? It makes you feel different. That they chose to do this because they knew it would make us happy. God has that same feeling when we make that choice to reach out to him and to love him. That's the relationship he wants, that we strive and we push to understand that and draw closer to him and grow in his wisdom, that this world then becomes something that's kind of behind us a little bit. And we can see, not that we'll ever reach perfection until we're with him. That's the only time we're going to have perfection. But one day we will be with him. But he says they're pursued by who he created us to be. But praise the Lord. He created us in such a way, and he put mechanisms in place that we can have that relationship, we can draw that wisdom from him, and we can have that direct communication through Jesus Christ to God without having to go to some human person to try to make intervention for us. We go directly through the Son of God to relate to God and ask for these things, and ask for wisdom, and ask for the strength to fight through these things, and the things we need to be the kind of children he wants us to be. To me, is totally awesome. I hope this week you carry that with you, that desire that he put in your heart to have that relationship and to think, pray in the mornings, God, give me wisdom for the day. You don't have to ask for wisdom for next year. Give me wisdom for today to make the choices that you would have me make in such a way that I would draw closer to you and we would represent him and glorify his name in all that we do. That would be a great day. If we can do it step by step by step. We're going to mess up, but we're going to draw a little closer, a little closer, and a little closer to him as we let him have more and more control of our lives. Y'all have a great day. Hope you enjoy. Have a good week.